Hello and welcome to this video on Blood Bowl 3 in the 2020 rule set. This one's about expensive mistakes. So you can see here, if I hover over there, a pop-up comes up saying if you have more than 100,000 in your treasury, you have to roll for expensive mistakes. And here it says if your treasury has at least 100,000 at the end of the post-game sequence, there's a chance players and staff will spend it irresponsibly. Roll a d6 on the expensive mistakes table. The higher your treasury, the greater the chance you have of losing some of it. Now, if you try and ignore this and go onto the spin button here, it just says impossible to join. And then if you click on there to try and get a game, it will just say impossible to join. This team is risking expensive mistakes. You must finish its post-match sequence in the team menu. You can click see the team, and then you have to press the expensive mistakes button before you can go any further. Okay, let's actually run the expensive mistakes now for this team. We click the button. Just gives you a confirmation pop-up, and then you click OK, and then once it comes up, it will tell you you've rolled a d6. Here we rolled a 3, so we've got a new amount, the same as the previous amount, because we got the crisis averted. So the rest of this video is going to be talking about how you can optimize your bank and minimize the amount you lose during the expensive mistakes roll. It's actually slightly more complicated than you might think, but you will be able to save perhaps up to 20k depending on what your bank is, just by following some simple instructions. Okay, so the expensive mistakes table looks like this. If you have 0 to 95k, you don't even have to roll. But if you have 100 to 195k, you need to roll with this result for a d6, getting a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, or a 6. So if you get a 1, you get a minor incident. Otherwise, you get crisis averted. If you have 200 to 295k, then you have a minor incident on a 1 or a 2, and then a crisis averted on a 3 to 6. 300 to 395, you get a major incident of a 1 and a minor incident on a 2 or a 3, and the crisis averted on the 4, 5, 6. 400 to 495, you get a major incident on a 1 or a 2, but now you get a minor incident on a 3 and a 4, with the crisis averted only being on a 5 or a 6. And then if you have 500 to 595k, you get a catastrophe for a 1, a major incident for a 2 and a 3, and then a minor incident for a 4 and a 5, and a crisis averted just for the 6. And then if you have 600k or more, you get a catastrophe on a 1 or a 2, and a major incident on a 3, 4, and then a minor incident on a 5 or a 6. So I've represented these mathematically with these formula here. So crisis averted, you multiply your current bank by 1 and you don't add or take off anything. With a minor incident, you multiply by 1 and then you take off an average of 20 because it's a D3 loss times 10k. Major incident, you times by 0.5 and don't add or take anything off because the logic is to half rounded down to the nearest 5k. And then a catastrophe, you multiply by 0 and then you add 70 because that's the average of 2d6 times 10k, which is all you're going to have left. Now we've done this, we can now plot your current gold versus a new average after the expensive mistakes roll, depending on whether you get the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, based on the new values here. So as you can see, from 0 to 95, you obviously get the same amount because you don't even have to roll. So I've just put it in for completeness to give a graph. But then when you get to 100, you then have a minor incident. So you can see here your 100 becomes 80 if you roll a 1, otherwise it stays the same. Now you can see that actually having 100 is better than having 95 because it goes up a little bit. So you get a slight wiggle in the graph, but it's obviously better to have 100 than 95. Moving on to the next boundary. So you can see here, when we go from 195 to 200, we now have a minor on a 1 and a minor on a 2 with the averted on the others. And again, you can see that having 200 is better than 195. The new average is still a little bit higher. And again, we just get a slight wiggle in the graph, but it's better to have 200 than 195. At the next boundary, things get a bit more interesting. You can actually see that there's a small drop here, and actually having 300 is actually worse than having 290 or 295, as is 305, 310, and 315, because the introduction of a major incident, if you roll a 1, makes it worse. Even 320 is better than 290, but not quite as good as 295. It's a similar story at the 400k boundary. Again, we get a dip. So having 400 to 425 is actually not as good as having 390 or 395. And having 430 is actually worse than having 395. And that's because we've introduced a second major along with the 2 minors at this point here. When we reach 500k, we add in the first catastrophe. So here we get a drop down to an average of 70k if we manage to roll a 1. And then we've got the major, minor, crisis averted. You can see here there's a very big drop. And in fact, we don't actually get back to the 405 and all the way through this band. Then when we get over to 600k, again, there's a drop all the way down to 316 because we add in the second catastrophe. And again, that doesn't actually become better until 780 because of the additional risk of dropping down due to the catastrophe. Okay, so in summary then for the expensive mistakes, first of all, before rolling it, you need to buy any required players or re-rolls. Then you need to shed money with these rules. So 300 up to 315 becomes 295 or 290, whichever one is the higher that you can do. 320 becomes 295. So you could buy and sell a Snotlin and a Cheerleader, for example. 400 to 425 needs to become 395 to 390. And again, 430 becomes 395. And then if you've got 500k or more, then you reduce that to 495 or 490. Only after that do you actually roll for the expensive mistakes. Okay, that's the end of this video. Hope it was useful. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you again soon.